I want to start by thanking everyone on this call today just by saying welcome. And I think we're going to have a fun hour. I'm going to do my best to be a lively moderator. And I think that the panelists that we have are absolutely fantastic. I'm going to introduce them really quick, if you all don't mind, because we have such a great group of people. It would be a complete mistake and it would be very disrespectful if I didn't. So I'd start off with our dear friend Latasha Taste, who is also a board member of AFP. She is currently the Director of Development and Community Relations for Communities and Schools here in the Midlands. Her primary role includes increase in the external and internal partnerships for the nonprofit she works for, and also to promote dropout in early intervention and prevention with communities and schools. Latasha joined Community and Schools in 2019, and since then, she has been able to secure over $250,000 in competitive grants and over $90,000 in individual giving. So, way to go, Tasha. That's pretty awesome. Um, Prior to that, she worked for the University of South Carolina as their senior marketing strategist. She is a graduate of the University South Carolina State University. Let me get that straight and go back to my notes. She's also a member of AAF Midlands, and also clearly a current member of AFP Central Carolina. We're very thankful that she's here. Next on our list, we have our dear friend Guillermo Espinoza. Guillermo is a senior planner for the Central Midlands Council of Governments. He received his master's in geography from the State University of New York, right? Is that what that stands for, Guillermo? Great.
Yeah,
State
Sunny.
University of New York in 2013. He utilizes his background in environmental science, cartography, and grant management to support CMCOG's various planning activities and programs. He is experienced in coordinating and collaborating with various government and private organizations to develop planning strategies related to water quality remediation, natural hazard mitigation, and community development. And just when you think he has no more free time, we have more on this list. Guillermo is also the development director for Alonzo Latina in the Midlands. Did I pronounce that correct, Guillermo? I think that's
Alianza Latina. Close.
Alianza Latina.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm butchering it, you all. Um, there, he manages a fresh food delivery program for low-income Hispanic residents. Between these two roles, he has managed more than $200,000 in federal, state, and private organization grants. He is currently a member of the Women's Rights and Empowerment Group Strategic Technical Advisory Board Group, a member of the Congaree Biosphere Region Advisory Council, and a member of the City of Columbia Zoning and Land Use Comprehensive Planning Subcommittees. So, I don't know how you do it, but thank you for being here. We appreciate your time. Last on our list, we have our panelist, Marcus Fogel, who is the Director of Development for the South Carolina Honors College. Marcus is a graduate of Claflin University with a bachelor's degree in business management and a master's degree in business administration. While working in fundraising for a decade, he has experience in annual giving, capital campaigns, grateful patient fundraising, and major giving. Marcus cares about helping institutions of higher learning deliver on their promises of being a place of access and success. In his spare time, he enjoys cycling, playing sports, and spending time with family. For the last 10 years, Marcus has been a youth basketball coach and speaks at several schools in the Columbia area. Prior to the COVID pandemic, Marcus spoke monthly at prisons within the South Carolina Department of Corrections at a program he helped create called Real Men, Real Talk. So, ladies and gentlemen who are on with us today, that is our panel, and we are ready to hop right into our conversation. And this first question is going to be for Ms. Taste. How do you define diversity, equity, and inclusion?
Well, I will define diversity, equity, inclusion by just, having a fair environment in the workplace for people to come and talk and be themselves. And I think that when we can have fair conversations, we can get to the root causes of things that might have went wrong in someone's role, the person that previously has been there. Because I know for me, in my role, the dynamics change. There was an older person at one time that was in my role. So the way that they go about doing development would have been very different from me. So those are some of the things that I had to really acknowledge in being in the type of environment that we're in. Communities and schools mostly supports youth, children, families, and schools. So knowing some of the traditional ways that they might have done fundraising back then, I'm not going to discredit them. But me being a younger generation, I had to be honest with myself and in the workplace that I'm in about, I'm not going to exclude myself from, those age groups, but I have to be honest about what works for me. So, really looking at the practices that best benefit the organization as a whole and not just one person. We do have more percentage of African American and minority on our staff. So with those variations, we want to be, open about conversations about, what our kids look like. They're going to look at us, and if they see more African American or, white American leaders that are giving them these services, those are questions that we have to answer within our own organization. So just really having those fair conversations and being open so that we don't exclude anyone and make them feel welcome. I really think that that's a big part of diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Thank you. Thank you. Guillermo, the same question.
Thank you. And I like Latasha's answer when it came to how you have to be aware of different dynamics and how you live in a system that, a society, so to speak, that has different factors that you have to be aware of when it comes to the work that you do. But to answer the question, I kind of see diversity, equity, and inclusion as related steps in a way. Maybe I don't have the dictionary in front of me, but to have diversity, you have to be inclusive. You have to reach out and include people. To have equity, you have to include those diverse points of view and integrate it into your own perspective. So it's this general awareness of how what is currently working or what worked before might not be the thing that is universally applicable to the issues that we all face. Everybody has their own problems. We're all human, but everybody has their own different context, socioculturally, politically, or individually. And that awareness is very important when it comes to this discussion, I feel.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Marcus, this next question is going to be for you. Often hiring practices and development lead to homogeneous pools of interview candidates. Do you have recommendations that would help ensure a more representative candidate pool?
Sure. In my previous institution and in my current institution, I've been one of the only African-American male lead fundraisers. So usually I'm the first African-American male in an academic unit at the university. And previously I've been the first African-American male in any aspect at an institution. And so one of the things that I think of is that when you look at trying to not create homogeneous pools, you need to look in different pools in itself. I think one of the things that I've experienced is that I myself, I'm a lifer in development. So I check all the boxes: undergrad, master's, years of experience, annual giving, major giving, grateful pay. So I've done several different things. I've noticed other counterparts, let's say I have several colleagues who come from sales, who enter into this field as a development officer at the same level I am, but didn't necessarily have to go through the channels that I went through. And so I think it's imperative that we look at different areas and give grace for those areas to say, okay, well, can these skills translate? Like I said, I have to check every box in order to get where I am, and I've earned, and I want others to have that same opportunity to say, well, he doesn't have direct fundraising skills, but does he have sales skills to be able to translate? And also, when you do bring those people in, you want to be equity. You want to provide equity, right? And so if you got someone that's been a lifer in development, understands, the ask, get the gift, repeat the gift, upgrade the gift. You also want to understand that someone not coming in may not understand some of that criteria. So I've seen a lot of that in institutions or organizations. You got a person who's been in the field for a while, person in diversity, and someone else comes in at the exact same level who knows almost nothing in development, and they're elevated to the exact same role. So you need to take that into account. And look in different pools and give grace because these skills do translate.
Wonderful, thank you. Tasha, did you want to chime in on that at all? I know that you mentioned before that you recently had to hire some people.
Yeah, so Marcus hit it on the head for me. And I'm just going to be honest with you all. I have a very strong marketing, PR, communication background, and our beloved director, Miss Dorian Mendez, who was our CEO at the time I was hired, I only knew her for 2 months and she passed away. And it was devastating. I was scared. I was like, what am I going to do? I know very little about development, but my dear friend, and soon I call him my adopted brother, Morel, and Lowndes, who's on the call too. I had to tap into people that could help me invest in myself and be realistic about what skills I had. Like I said, marketing is my strong suit. And I had very little training about development, but I'm a person that, has a really strong work ethic. I'm someone that's like, hey, I don't know, but I'm going to find out. And I really believe that, sometimes it's not all about what you know, it's about what you're willing to grow and learn. And knowing a little bit of those dynamics, I just came in with an open mind, had some failures and just had to be really honest about, what my marketing skills could grow into. And like Marcus said too, even though I don't have 10 years of experience, I've certainly felt like I've been at community schools longer than 2 years and the work that I've done. And I have to acknowledge that and allow others to be open to and accepting me and the work that I've done too. Because sometimes it's hard. You have people that have been with an organization for years and years, and then you have this new person that comes in and kick down the door. I'm not bragging. But I've had to fight, and it's been a fair fight, and I'm just glad that I had the opportunity to do the work that I do and also make an impact while that work is being done.
Thank you, Tasha. Guillermo, this next question is going to be for you. And I also like to tell everybody, Mary Dell did a fabulous job of compiling these questions. I cannot take credit for this at all. I'm simply the amplifier and the voice. But thank you so much, Mary Dell. These are fabulous and they're very thought-provoking. Guillermo, white fundraisers may not even recognize barriers that fundraisers of color experience. Can you identify some of those barriers and steps we can take to remove them?
That's really a big question. I guess you can narrow it down to variables, right? Like you've got different social cultural backgrounds that have, different languages, cultural differences, and different perspectives on how to approach the same problems. It could be an issue of access to resources and the network of support that historically may not be there. Doesn't mean it's a limitation on the individual's part. It may just be that the resources were not there when they first started. And when it comes to calling those barriers, I think in trying to address that problem of differences, it might be beneficial to see them as benefits, because diversifying your perspective individually and that one of your organization can only be beneficial in terms of providing it more resiliency, in terms of adapting to change in your market and the audience that you serve, and trying to understand the audience that you serve and how it changes dynamically. It requires that self-awareness and humility and grace that the other panelists have been talking about. It's about seeing potentially your limitations in the approach that's currently institutionalized and seeing how you can reach out and understand what the problems that other people are facing and the solutions that actually work in the moment. So I see them, or I try to see them as barriers, but as benefits.
Marcus, did you want to chime in on that at all?
Sure. I think the barriers do exist. As a person of color, I manage about 120 people that don't look like me. And I think that's an interesting dynamic to go into these rooms and be able to convey the mission and vision of an institution or an organization. So there are barriers, and it's always good that other fundraisers or leadership does acknowledge that person of color, there will be barriers, right? And so it's good to have that conversation. So I always say anybody, if you see a person of color in development, understand that they go through different set of barriers than you, right? That's understandable. So every day is not a good day for being a person of color in development, because you're an anomaly. You're almost like a unicorn in itself, to be truthfully honest. Several of the rooms that you go in, many people you interact, they're surprised to see you, and that's something that you got to really understand. So empathize with them, understand the role. And one of the things I can say is that if you hire people that look like you and understand you, then your organization will never get better than you. And so you have to have diverse experiences. Guillermo said fresh eyes. He talked about fresh eyes having new vision. I think that's very important to bring into any institution or organization to see things from a different vantage point. But those barriers are there. But I think the more that we get it out there over the years, you've seen especially with this year, all the social change. And this year you had to pay attention to the news, right? By default, everything's going on. And so some of the barriers have been, brought down a little bit, but they're still there, but they've been brought down a little bit more. So now people are more aware of the problems, just all throughout society in itself. And so more awareness, putting these development officers out there. I think a lot of marketing material, You know, and I would love, you know, I've been seeing more campaigns for diversity, and it's been very exciting to see, you know, whether it's a marketing campaign or fundraising, you know, you've been seeing these different images of diversity, and it's good to see in that sense. So I think continue that effort, and I think we'll move in the right direction.
Thank you. Tasha, this next question is for you. Um, what do you think are the driving factors that keep fundraising a primarily white profession?
Can you repeat that one more time? You went off. You went out on the last part.
No, it's okay. I said, what do you think are the driving factors that keep fundraising a primarily white profession?
Hmm. Well, one thing, I was just looking up an article on the Chronicle of Philanthropy, and for those of you who do not have that subscription, it's really great. They send out a lot of emails throughout the month. But something that I read was that a lot of fundraisers really don't know the dynamics of who's donating. Um, you know, there's studies out there that show that, you know, in certain programs and certain industries, Black or African American donate more than some whites. So I think for me, looking at that dynamic, you know, and me being a woman of color, that gives me a motivation to not have you know, a bias against something that I don't know, because, you know, before coming in development and me being like a volunteer for a junior chamber, I was surrounded around a lot of white members that donated. And there were very few people that looked like me. And I started to do a little bit of research and learned that there were more African Americans that gave to certain causes than some of the whites. So I think we really have to look into, you know, what kind of work we're doing to really find the truth, and how not to, you know, take ourselves out of an opportunity to see, you know, what's really out there, and what those dynamics are, so we don't set ourselves up for failure and we don't lose confidence in the work that we're doing if we're in the right place at the right time.
That's a great answer. Marcus, I'm going to hop back to you. Did you want to chime in on that one?
I definitely did. One of the things I can see that primarily keeps fundraising a white profession, I think, is access to relationships. Everyone says it's not who you know, it's who knows you. And I've been fortunate because of my color to be in some of the rooms with some people say, hey, we need some diversity. Marcus, please come in. And when you see that, it's interesting because usually those rooms are all white. Usually I'm the only person in almost the Black person, every room I go into in development. And to have the access to that most affluent person in your region, who typically does have some form of influence, that's interesting to be on their calendar, to have coffee or lunch with that person. I mean, these people are being come at from hundreds of different directions for all different types of things. And for you to have access to, one of the university's biggest donors is almost that's a privilege in itself. Many don't have access to and will never have access to. And I think by default, the barriers go up, right? And so when you're thinking about, oh, these relationships are powerful for you professionally and personally, because the cultivation process, they fall in love with you just as much as you fall in love with them and your organization. So it's a happy relationship between it. And also, you know, you will have homogenous pools. Like we said earlier, I mean, you know, you invite these people in the room that look just like you, that understand your vision. You don't want to deviate from that because you're nervous and scared that you may ruffle feathers, and you don't want to get that person's interest to be different. And so by default, we create homogenous pools of people that look like us in these rooms. But I would say that's a big part of it, because these people have, you know, if you have the ear to your biggest donor, who's probably another biggest donor for another institution, if they know you on a first name basis and can write an email on your behalf, that speaks volumes, right? And so access to these individuals, I would say, or to opportunities, I think is one of the biggest factors as well.
Great. I'm going to go off script really quick. Oh my gosh, I'm so tongue tied today. Guillermo, I'm gonna piggyback off what Marcus just said. I have a question for you. You know, he talked about being in the room with these big donors, these people who have influence, and these people who have power. You jumped around on my screen, sorry. Tell me about what I would like to hear your thoughts, and I'm pretty sure other people in the room would like to hear your thoughts on being able to use that time, that very precious time, to promote diversity, equity, and inclusion also.
Yeah, I agree with the points of the other panelists for sure. Like, it's very uninspiring to I go to rooms with elected officials, with different types of organizations, nonprofits, neighborhood associations. It's very uninspiring when you go there and you're like this almost tokenized person, but seeing it in the first place is so important. Like somebody else behind me might be looking and saying like, hey, it's possible. That's a great start. But thinking of instead of this top-down approach of, you see these fundraisers like looking down and seeing the problems and seeing what they can solve, but maybe talking about the bottom-up issues of there's not enough access to culturally appropriate resources to potentially understand the fundraising process, to be able to get the certifications or registrations that you need to be able to do that in an easy way, because the network and the community is not as established. And I feel like, just having the resources in different languages is a good start. And going back to that top-down approach, right? Like if this profession kind of makes itself kind of siloed because of that's how the network is currently established, trying to understand how the lack of resources keeps people away from being part of that discussion can also help take those blinders off. Like, understand your audience. There's information out there so you can understand how your community actually is composed. And if you're just going by what's prescribed based on what the success of your organization was 5, 10, 30 years ago, then you're not actually paying attention to what the people that you're potentially serving actually need.
Wonderful. Mary Dell, it looks like we have a couple of questions in the chat box. And so I want to use this moment really quick to take a break as we approach our half-hour mark to see if we wanted to go through those.
Yeah, so Debbie asked a really great question, and it's one that I share as well. We've talked a lot about race, but can we talk a little bit about intersectionality? So race, ethnicity, gender, immigration status, class, and how that comes into play. And I'll tag on my own question to that. I think a lot of times we see donors recognized for the size of their gift. And so we'll say a major donor is $10,000 or more, but you may have somebody who's giving $100, and that's a much more significant portion of their income. And so how do you think that how we recognize and acknowledge donors drives some of that continued inequity in community investment? Especially at the university level where you're talking like major gifts, or with you, Morel, where you may have a client who wants to give back for the services that they've received, and what they're giving is a major gift to them, but isn't what you'd qualify as putting a plaque on the wall.
Well, I will let the panelists go first, and then I'll tag on my part at the end. So who wants to tackle that question?
I'll jump at it. One of the things that I try to do in recognizing, people at different levels, right? I always said one of the things that I've loved to recognize is people give major giving in time. And you identify who those people are. They may not necessarily have the treasure like some others, but they necessarily give their time. And I have major contributors of time. And I often value them just as much, if not more, than those who give their treasure, because I may only have 30 minutes to say, hey, can you contribute at this level? And they say yes, and which is probably less than 1% of what they can really do, versus someone who's giving me, at least 50 or 75% of their time. Anytime I call, they come to events, they're all emailing, phone calls. So, and I like to highlight them in all the things that we do, whether it be newsletters and making them available, allowing them to be an advisor to the things that I do, and maybe the dean or some others, because they're just as important. And so I've always said your university can acknowledge major giving in dollars and major giving in time. And many of our best people give major giving in time, but as the question stated, it's not always recognized. So I try to make sure that that's something that's highlighted to say, well, this person, we couldn't get here without this person. And you highlight them at that same event that you highlight that major donor, and they get something as well, and so that's a good feeling for everybody to say, well, maybe I can't do what Warren Buffett did, right? But I can do what that little lady did who come every day to every event, right? So something along those lines. It would be something that I would love to see more institutions do.
Guillermo or Tasha, did you want to chime in on that one?
I can chime in a little. Man, it's definitely a humbling question. I can't speak to what the other side is facing, but I can invite into the table. And sometimes it's building that network of diverse perspectives that is a task in itself. Like, I work with the Hispanic community, but, I can only grasp at what, women face in the workplace, etc. I can only grasp at what other people of color are facing, and I feel that requires a lot of humility and practicing to be an effective communicator and being humble about it, to say that you don't know what the issue is, and and being upfront about setting the expectation that you're inviting that person because their perspective is important and you don't know what they're actually facing. And when it comes to effective communication, it sometimes requires you to really understand the problem that is being faced, simplifying it so it can be understood across a wide spectrum of education levels, and trying to disseminate that information in a way that everybody understands the problem and they can participate in the process. So I don't know how to speak the same language for everybody, but at the very least, inviting them to the table as important perspectives to the issue, I think is important.
I agree with that as well. And Community Schools has been around for 33 years or more. And a unique situation that I have coming into this is, I kind of look back in history and, who was all a part of this thing and where it all began. And I'm fortunate to still be in contact with the founder who bought CIS to South Carolina, and talking to her and getting to know her. And she's up in age. She's has to be in her 70s or 80s. So learning the dynamics of that history and things that she's experienced, working alongside parents who had kids that were truant. I mean, those were some really hard, tough situations. She's a white woman, and she rolled up her sleeves and she was down in the trenches with those parents and those kids. And, sometimes you look, well, she's a white woman, why is she doing this? What is she getting the benefit out of it? And that's, her not excluding herself from, working with a family that doesn't look like her, or someone that might, people might feel like, they're below me, why is she helping? So really understanding the historical dynamics of those relationships really help people like me, grow and be humble. Like your hermano said. And I think if we really look at, those truths and find out for ourselves, we can have more meaningful relationships in the work that we do. And it won't, push us away or push the organization away about contacting or being in contact and engage with people that were, first, a part of bringing your organization to existence in your community.
Okay, add one more point, Chris? Can I add one more point?
Of course.
Okay, sorry, I'm kind of messed up. I think respect might be a key word here, because you might be coming in not knowing what's going on in a community, and there might be a lot of activity and people that are already working on the issue because they're facing it. And when you try to reach out, you have to be aware that maybe what works for you doesn't work for somebody else, but it doesn't mean that it's any less valuable. And reaching out with that respect of hey, you contributed your time to solve this problem, and it's very important. And maybe this is the actual solution to the problem, not whatever I was thinking in my desk when I look at all these data. Like tap into that network of people, and they'll help you solve the problem. Don't swoop in and pretend that you have all the answers.
Thank you. I'll add something really quick. I know we've taken a little bit more time on this, but Deborah, and Mary Dell, this is actually a really fabulous question, and it's one that we have been thinking about here at Mercy for over the past year now. For those on the call who don't know what Mercy does, we help individuals who are homeless and recovering from mental illness, and so what we get is people who have been chronically homeless, sometimes for 25 years, and they have been exposed to way more than just homelessness. I'm sure you probably could imagine that they've been victims of sexual trauma. They've been robbed, they've probably been arrested, and they probably don't have the best record that you would imagine someone should have. But one thing that we recognize is that a lot of our clients who come in, they come from families who might not be the most affluent. And then on the opposite end of the spectrum, we have families who they come from very affluent families. They were real estate moguls. They might have been doctors at some point, and they have access to a lot of wealth, which is very interesting for me because when I look at my records, earlier Tasha talked about researching your donors. When I looked at my records, and you do your donor search and you do that profile on each of your donors, our donors here at Mercy are not rich. Our donors are very much middle class donors who give when they can give, they give their time and they give their energy. And that is so important. It's kind of hard for us to say a big donor because for us, a big donor is somebody who comes every Wednesday to cook for us and spend time with our youth at our youth drop-in center. That's huge. That's really valuable to us. Today, in fact, we're going to be honoring one of our longtime donors, who some of you might know. He's an icon in mental health. His name is Greg Pierce. And his role as a member of the Richland County Council, his role as an advocate at the Department of Mental Health has really allowed Mercy to shine and flourish because he's an ambassador for us. And so while he has never, ever given a dime to the organization, and I'm saying that's might because he most certainly has given his money too, but what's most valuable to us is his friendship, because we know that if we ever need to call on him and say, hey, we have a question about a specific policy, or what are your ideas or your thoughts on this, that is just as valuable to us as anything else. And one of the things that we know is that when and everyone knows this in the world of marketing, Tasha, you know this, you and I share this in common, but the strongest form of marketing is word of mouth, right? It is, you can spend countless dollars on billboards, paid ads, and collateral to go with things. But if a friend comes to you with a personal experience and says, hey, I know this organization is a fabulous organization, and this is why. One of the things we've noticed, Deborah, is that a lot of our folks who have been talking about us in our community have talked to their friends about how we address social determinants. And that means, number one, in my opinion, that we're doing the right thing. It means that people can see the reason why we're doing it, and that they can see that we're addressing the person as a whole and not just their symptoms. But to merge those two together, as we do our work, a lot of our work that we do is billable because we are a clinic, we're a healthcare provider. But as we blend those two together, it is always nice to have someone show up to your door with a bag full of toothpaste for our homeless outreach team, or having somebody just drop off a card and say, hey, I just wanted you to know that we're thinking about you and we appreciate the work that you're doing in the community. That is the kind of stuff that really warms our heart, because sometimes we feel like we're the unseen stepchild, and that the work we're doing should be seen by how our community looks and not heard of. People, there's a stigma around mental health and mental illness. And so really, I guess to sum it all up, just full gratitude in the best way possible, no matter what the person's ambition for giving or thinking of you or passing along a good word means for Mercy anyway, an incredible deal to us. And we are always very appreciative of it. And we're always reaching out to our donors just to say thank you, even if everything that they donate to us is what we call in kind. And so that's how we address it. It is just as big as anything else, and it holds the same exact weight. So now that I've taken 4 minutes of your time, we can hop back into it. Does anyone else have any questions, Mary Dell?
Well, I wanted to jump in and go specifically back to Guillermo. I think part of the conversation we had in the pre-panel discussion on Monday was around immigration status and approaching donors and how you have that discussion. And so I wondered if you could talk a little bit about the work that you're doing around that and your experiences around addressing questions about immigration status.
It's really a political and then almost cultural issue from my experience here in the South, right? I'm a full citizen. I'm from Puerto Rico, but I can definitely identify with the rest of the Hispanic community when it comes to they're just people. They're just like you and I. They have the same problems, and they're here to work hard and provide for their families. And I think that sometimes it's hard to understand for some reason, just for certain aspects of the population, especially in the South. And I think trying to sometimes make it about the shared existence of humanity and the problems that we all face has been more effective in trying to garner interest than saying like not burying the lead and saying that we're trying to help illegal immigrants feed their families. It's more like we're trying to help people feed their families, and I think that's very important because everybody needs food, and it doesn't matter where you're from. It's just a requirement for life. So I won't be able to solve the political issue. I have my opinions about it. I don't think it's worth spending that much time and effort on chasing people that are here to work. But if you focus it on what the problem is, it helps. If you focus it on what the solutions are and you have a work program to address the problems, it helps. And if you can manage to get some benefit in a regional sense to not only the specific community you're serving, but the region at large, it also helps to kind of, paint it in a better light. But I guess to go a bit beyond that, I recently read an article that like about 60% of organizations in South Carolina don't have the resources to translate or interpret to different languages. And we're talking federal and state organizations that should have these resources because they receive federal funding and it's required of them to have this ability, and they don't. And sometimes it's about, if you're a small enough organization, maybe you don't have the resources, but otherwise you really should make an effort. And that's bad, I guess. Just to summarize that, like you should really make an effort if you belong to any kind of organization that has to serve a diverse population. So if you're one of those, I hope you're listening. If not, reach out really, because there's members and businesses in the community that want to help. There's plenty of people that speak Spanish that are ready to translate stuff for you if you pay them fairly. You just have to actually look and be willing to do stuff like that for what your audience is. So yeah, it's definitely a tough question to answer, but I feel that empathy, first of all, is a big first step.
Thank you, Guillermo. Marcus, I'm going to jump right back into our list of questions here, if you don't mind. This question is something that I think a lot of us have pointed out as far back as May after the George Floyd incident took place. Many organizations are making diversity and inclusion statements. What rings authentic to you and what seems like hollow words?
That's a good question. It really is. And so many, I've seen so many institutions or organizations acknowledge the problem. It would got to be such a big problem that you had to almost say something. But you saw so many things that were inauthentic. And so one of the things that I saw was good that people did put funding behind what they believed in. And so if you put your treasure and your time in something, I thought that was very interesting. I've seen big organizations not only make a contribution, but they put boots on the ground so they can learn and actually be better. When you reach a certain level of major giving, you see organizations or people write checks to say, hey, I believe in this, just so they don't be in that crowd. But they don't necessarily put boots on the ground and say, okay, we were wrong in our efforts previously. This is how we can be better. And we're actively learning. We're putting action plans in place. A check is it will help, but you're not learning. And so I've seen many organizations do that. And I could tell that, are you coming from a place of really wanting to learn, or just so we don't look at you and you can possibly get canceled, right? We don't want to put you in the cancel culture. So I've contributed to, I've contributed to the Hispanic community. I contributed to the Black community, guys. I'm not against you guys, but are you actually getting better, right? What did you learn? Did you actually go and talk to these people that were marginalized? If not, then I can obviously tell that's inauthentic.
Tasha, did you want to add anything to that?
Yes, I do. Just laughing. Gosh, Marcus said a whole lot. I think the biggest thing is just being real. We saw a lot of things from people, and I know I'm a huge communicator. I'm on Facebook, Twitter, looking around, seeing what's out there, the news outlets, and looking at conversations. And you really saw the true colors of people. Even like Marcus, said, even donors, and not anything negative, but you really saw the true colors of people. And I think the light bulb went off on, who's being real and who's just saying, nice words. My team calls me the queen of fluff because they come to me to write everything and they're like, please make this beautiful. But I'm going to keep it real. I'm going to be real. I'm not going to be fake. And I think that the covers and the masks came off some people, and it was just a disheartening thing. But at the same time, we had to really realize, the world that we're living in our state, here in South Carolina, and how we can move beyond that, and speak intentionally. And I know that our CEO, Ms. Epps, is really serious about that. Be intentional about who you are and what you're doing, because we work with kids. And I have 2 little kids at home, and they will tell me, Mom, that's not going to work. Kids realize, when you're being, real with them, or if you're not being honest with them, they can see it. And I think we as adults and professionals, we can see that too. So we just have to be honest about, what we put out there, especially when these, racial, mishaps happen in our community. And even for us too, we have over 85% of youth that we serve that are African American. So, our national office has, certain language, and here locally, 3 CIS affiliates in South Carolina, some of us work differently. Some of us are more conservative, some of us are in a more business environment. So, some of us respond in other ways, and then across the state, some of us had a more harder intentional response. And that's not saying that, one organization or another is hiding behind their words, but if you're serving that populations as well, like Marcus said, are you going to say something? Are you just going to sit back and look at this big plane that's about to crash? So I think that we really have to be intentional, be real, and then also look at the population that we're serving. Because if there's an issue and our populations are involved, we have to be involved, and we also have to get our donors and people involved to realize, like, look, something is really wrong. We want you to be a part of it, but we also want you to, mobilize with us so that we can move forward.
Thank you, Tasha.
Again,
yeah, of course.
Excellent points. I think my summarized answer to that question is that representation within those organizations and the activities they do is actually more indicative of their practices than the statements that they release. And I feel the way the organization is run could be something internal, like that doesn't have to be a public statement. It can be training within your organization. Debbie Billings posted something that the USC did. I think those kinds of programs and events are important to at least raise awareness. Like, awareness is so important, education is so important, understanding and be able to understand those different perspectives is so important. But getting my planner hat on, because I work with data, including census data, etc. I make maps. You mentioned cartography in my introduction. GIS is Geographic Information Systems, and it's pretty much mapping data spatially. So if you see a map, it's a geographic information system most of the time. To summarize and get out of the weeds, I just posted a link about a resource that organizations can use to track diversity within their own organizations and within some of the activities that they do. There's some technical barriers when it comes to jumping to understand these things, right? Like, not everybody, if you're not computer literate, you might have issues with these things, but you can also do things that are not particularly difficult to track that information within your own staff. Human resources should be doing this in the first place. And if you're serving an audience, you should be able to track this information in a private manner so you can cater your activities to their needs. So information is very important and eye-opening if you're willing to track it and adapt based on what you see.
Thank you. Really quick, we have about 10 minutes left. So I wanna really quick get through these questions. So I'm gonna do 1, 2, 3, just one person answer the next 3. And Marcus, the next one would be for you. How do you decide when to ignore or engage when you experience racism or discrimination in your work?
Could you say it one more time?
I said, how do you decide when to engage or ignore racism when you experience it in your work?
Um, I experience it a lot, just being that all of my prospects are opposite of me. And so upon that first meeting, I always say I always go on a blind date. So every day for me is a blind date, whether that be an in-person visit, I travel to come see you. So every day is a blind date. Oftentimes it's a bit of shock initially. And once we get over that, we can kind of get down to business. But, I see a lot of, and Guillermo talked about some of it, with the immigration. I've seen a lot of that occurring lately. And so we ignore those funding. I've turned down major gifts from several people that says, no, we can't do this. This is not what we support and the university supports. I myself have to be very discerning. That comes with the territory of development. Me being a person of color in the field, it is almost expected, right? And so once we get over the hump, I'm okay because I understand I have a goal and I have a vision, and this is my job. I always say this is my passion. And so once we get over the hump and we get over that, yes, I am an African-American male in development, and you won't speak with anybody else from the Honors College but me, we'll get there. And if your passions align with what you really want to do, then you'll look past your bias. I always say I'm very forgiving in that sense because my job is to educate. All of us coming to work every day, we're educating the masses about what minorities can do in the workplace. And so, I'm fine with that initial discrimination, and we can move past it. If not, I can definitely, move on from them. But, it's expected, and I think I move well past it.
Thank you. Tasha, this next question is for you. If you face the weight of these issues every day that we just mentioned earlier, how and why do you stay engaged in this work?
Similar to Marcus, what he said, I mean, me being here at Communities in Schools, I don't just see it as a job. I feel like, I'm doing a service to my community and to myself. I came from a really small rural town. If anybody know where Cross is, it's near Charleston, Orangeburg area, but I grew up in some of what I'm working at. Family members, even in my own household. So, this work is meaningful for me, not just to help, financially provide for my family, but it means more. And I think that, when we can really look deep down into our hearts, and outside of, the skills that we have that come into this work, it keeps me here. It keeps me to not to want to walk away because, discrimination is everywhere. And I've gone through some of those similar issues as well. I've talked to a journal on the phone, and when I met them in person, because I've gotten that my voice sounds different than the way I look. They thought I was a white woman when they met me. They thought that they were going to look at a white woman. When I got there, it was me, and they were like, "Oh, okay." And you can't let those little small experiences deter you from staying into this profession because those are just things that are going to happen. If not now, they're going to happen somewhere. So knowing where I came from and where I am and the circumstances that I grew up, that keeps me grounded, and knowing that someone is depending on me for something to happen. I look at these kids like they're my own. And that's what keeps me here and grounded, and just educating myself on the dynamics of African American in philanthropy and development. And even working closely with my, white counterparts or, Hispanic counterparts, whoever. You really have to know your surroundings and try not to separate yourself, just because of your skin color.
A good one. I think we've all been there where we walk into a room and people are like, oh, you get this side, and it's like, oh boy, here we go. How am I going to overcome this? And you're right, we just have to because it's not about us, right? It's about our mission and our cause. And I think that that's something we might have all experienced at some point where you're just like, this is not about me, this is not about you, this is about the end result here. Guillermo, this question is for you, and it's going to sound crazy, but I know that when we had our pre-meet, we brought this up, but the question is, when is diversity too much? And just to give everyone a little bit of background, this question came up because Tasha works for Communities in Schools, and her organization is noticeably more African American and more dominated by females than typical. And so we were like, well, what does that look like? And just to play devil's advocate, we threw this question in there. So Guillermo, you're on.
Oh, well, looking forward to this. Maybe the issue and intrinsic to that question is not diversity; it's lack of diversity. So, right now, if you look at different boards and you see that they're mostly made of white people, then that's not diversity, right? We can say that, but if you look at a board that's mostly women, then that's also a lack of diversity in some way. That's a lack of perspective. It doesn't mean that they can't do their job in the same way that you're looking at a whiteboard and they can also do their job, but they're missing a perspective that makes it less effective. So when it's diversity too much, when it's ineffective. And again, with intrinsic caveat that maybe it's not a too much diversity, it's a lack thereof. So it goes back to the understand your audience and try to be representative of it. It might not be that there's a person ready to jump into a board position that will add diversity, but man, if there is, just jump at the chance. They may not have all the abilities that is in the posting, so to speak. Like Marcus brought up a good point. Like you can be into marketing or sales, and then you can jump into fundraising. Like that's a different perspective that you can apply to the problem, and that's diversity. But if you just get a bunch of fundraisers that study fundraising, and forgive me for saying that, I jumped in from a different perspective as well. I'm a planner. I deal with grants. I deal with other stuff. So I guess maybe the another root of that question is a bias when it comes to there shouldn't be too many of this because it makes the work ineffective as well. So you gotta have self-awareness from both ends. I guess it's the answer, and be aware of the audience that you're serving.
Wonderful, wonderful. We have about 3 minutes left. Mary Dale, were there any questions in our queue that you wanted to bring up for our panelists before we have to hang up?
I think, here we go. Question from Kate. So as development staff, we're not all making the decisions to build a more equitable organization. So steps that you can take to push leadership to continue to advance equity and diversity.
I'm going to jump in and reiterate the point that if your organization uses any kind of federal funds, they should be doing this already. So if you need the stick, that's the stick. But if you want to be an advocate, sometimes it's about being comfortable and confronting that. It doesn't have to be you have to fight every single time. Like Marcus and Latasha were saying, that sometimes it's about moving past the surface and addressing the actual problem. And this actual problem, and it has benefits. There's benefits to addressing this problem, not just for the community that you're trying to help. There's benefits to the organization itself. The more diverse you are, the more resistant to catastrophic change you are. You're resilient to change if you diversify your organization, you diversify your market. It's better. I don't know how else to say it, but diversity brings strength. And when it's diversity too much, right? There's that question, but I feel like lack of diversity is more of a problem than too much diversity, and I'd rather trend towards that side and see what the problem is than just stick with the blinders and go like it works based on what we did before, so let's just keep doing it.
Wonderful, wonderful. Meredith, I think that wraps us up for this afternoon's luncheon. I know that a lot of people dropped some nuggets and some knowledge, some nuggets and bits and pieces. I cannot talk today, you all. Of links that I know Guillermo shared a couple, and I was wondering, I just wanted to remind, I don't know if we can email it to everyone, the links that Guillermo shared with us. But for everyone on the call, go ahead and check your chat box and pull those bad boys out, because I believe once we hang up, they'll be gone forever.
So we will be sending out the recording, and we'll pull the links from the chat as well to share with everyone. And we hope that everybody found this time as meaningful. I know that I really appreciate the sharing and the emotional labor that our panelists have put forward for us, and the wonderful information and time. And we just could not be more appreciative. I think we all have a lot to walk away with, but I would also be remiss not to mention that AFP meets every month, and every month we try to bring value to our membership. And so Next month, we have a great workshop with the Winkler Group out of Charleston on taking the fear out of major gifts. We have a planned giving workshop coming up in May and a number of other really exciting opportunities. Our whole program for the year is already lined out on our website. So if you want to see what we're offering from month to month, you can go ahead and check that out. It's $150 to be registered for every single program that we're offering across the year, an incredible value, and a great savings from registering from programs one off. And so we do try to record our programs. We do plan on meeting virtually for a long time. And Morel, I'll let you close out from there with those final remarks.
Well, I think you've done a fabulous job. I hope that everyone takes some of Mary Dale's advice and signs up. If you're not a member, become a member. I hope that this conversation that we've had will be something that will hang in your ear for a little bit longer. And if you have any questions between now and whenever, you can always get in touch with us. I think you all have Mary Dale's contact. I cannot off the top of my head think of AFP's email. Tasha, do you know our general email address?
Yes, it's afpcsc dot, is it com or net? I think it's .net.
I think it's .net.
And yeah, and you can also follow our Facebook page at AFPCSC. So you can look that up and make sure to follow because you'll receive a lot of our communications and hopefully we can highlight some more members.
Oh, wonderful. Well, Guillermo, Marcus, and Tasha, I want to give you a special thank you and a shout out for your time today. To the rest of our guests, also thank you for your time today. It is 1:02, so we are 2 minutes over, and I apologize for keeping you. I know how valuable everyone's time is. Hope you have a wonderful day. Thank you and goodbye.